Welcome to episode 318 of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about Wukong's director says more stuff, Xbox's fancy controller is still coming, probably, more Half-Life 3 rumors, of course, and much more. Before we get started, subscribe to the Baunfire Gaming Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you're on Spotify or iTunes, please consider leaving a review. And if you prefer, you can subscribe to the Bon Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members or Twitch subscribers. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, check out the links in the show description. Let's get into the gaming news and hit it off with our main story. The game science director says on their private Weibo account that the 10 gigabytes of shared memory on the Series S is hard for them to optimize Wukong Fallen Dynasty 4. I think that's the name. This has been an ongoing saga. So this is a game that's currently on PlayStation. It then released on PC shortly after, I believe, after some period. But it's not been on Xbox. And the reason for that has been pretty vague, hotly debated. In theory, official sources on quote unquote both sides have chimed into why, and they've contradicted each other, of course. And we'll probably never really know the truth. And what's frustrating about it is a few things, but let's jump into it. So his statement, it's being presented that the lower amount of shared RAM, basically, on the Series S is making it hard, supposedly, for them to optimize Wukong 4. This is on top of previous rumors that the hardware of the Series S was the reason the game hasn't come out on Xbox yet. This whole saga has been so interesting because, like, they've released this game on PC, which means that they have, it has minimum specs, which from what I peeked at aren't, that much better, or if they are at all, than the Series S hardware. They are capable of optimizing the game for a literal, uncountable number of PC hardware combinations, including extremely old PC hardware. They're able to do that. They're able to make it work on the PlayStation 5 for reasons we'll find out, I assume. But they just can't manage to do it with the Series S, right? Weird, right? You're talking about a studio that, they're really portraying themselves as like this ho-hum, we're just getting started, guys, studio, but they're a gigantic studio that's made a wildly successful game financially, in theory, and they're just the little underdogs that just can't quite make it work. They just can't figure out how to make this one system, even though every single other developer and studio in the world, for the most part, who's made a game in the last 4 years, has made it work on the Series S. Many of them, especially recently, in 60 FPS modes or higher quality 30 FPS modes, they've been able to make it work, because at the end of the day, they're just computers, and it's just a lower scale, lower end one that you have to scale it down to, right? But they just can't figure this one out. And it's interesting because this has been portrayed. It's interesting for two reasons. The first one being, and all the media portrayal, especially here, but in previous statements as well, is the Series S is so bad that they can't make this game work on it. Even though that's not been the case for basically any other game. The example that keeps popping up here is like, well, Baldur's Gate 3 had this issue too. Baldur's Gate 3 was trying to run 2 instances of the game at once, which still doesn't work well on the Xbox Series X or PS5. It's choppy because you're running the game twice. So yeah, obviously the Series S definitely had an issue with that. So they had to cut the co-op. And that was the one concession there. That's not the situation here with Wukong. Wukong is a visually pretty game by all accounts, but it's not doing anything so unique and interesting, other than invisible walls blocking you off from, parts of the map you can't go to, obviously, and things. It's not doing anything special. So it's not doing two instances of the game at once. So there's no reason why they should be having any more issues than any other game has that has made this work. But the way that it's getting portrayed in all the stories and by influencers, and especially the console warriors, is, oh, the Series S sucks, so they can't make it work. When literally the director of this game is saying that their studio is incompetent, that they don't have the skills to do it. It's been even more hilarious that I've seen a bunch of people portraying this as confirmation that there's no exclusivity deal with PlayStation. Like, it's not true. They don't have to admit that. Like, they don't have to acknowledge a deal. The most recent side of that is that Xbox as a company has come out and said twice now, we can't control, what deals these people make with other platforms, which was pretty obvious. But they've also denied clearly twice that the hardware isn't the issue. The hardware is not the issue with Wukong being on Xbox or not. We've also had insiders like Jez Corden, reinforcing that. And even after this story happened, he went back again, and his sources have told him that there's some kind of exclusivity deal between Wukong and Sony. We do know that Sony did throw in money for funding for some reason. It doesn't make any sense why they would need to do that, but they did. It's almost as if they were paying for a deal of some kind. And that there may be like an engineering exclusivity deal, so that they may be doing this kind of cheeky thing where they don't technically have an exclusivity deal with Sony, but they can only work with Sony on optimization for so long, so that they aren't able to work with Xbox for a while. And then of course, but they just can't happen to optimize it, right? Go figure. How convenient that may be the case. So, it's interesting. It's frustrating for me, obviously, because I'm an Xbox fan. I'm not going to deny that I am. That's fine. But it's stupid because this is being portrayed as an Xbox problem when when even the director is acknowledging it's a developer problem. They're unskilled. They're if he's telling the truth. But if he's lying, it's because they have a deal with PlayStation, and no matter whether the Series S existed or not, Wukong wouldn't be on Xbox yet. Now, we know that Wukong was submitted for ESRB rating for Xbox last year in 2024. Again, that to me is just like, yeah, they submitted it, so they'll have an ESRB rating when that exclusivity deal is over and they can release on Xbox. Like, this reminds me a lot of, and of course I can't even remember the game now, but through 2024, there was this saga that kept popping up. There was another game that the developer was having some kind of issue with communication with Xbox, and they couldn't get the game on there. And there was this big, like, all the influencers and game media folks are, oh, Xbox is, incompetent. They can't get this game on their system. And PlayStation has it. And then this developer saying that Xbox is ignoring them and all this stuff. Then Xbox figured out the issue, fixed them up. The game came out and it sold like 50 copies. No one cares about it. No one ever talked about it again. Once that issue, the game, no one cared about the game. They cared about this issue, quote unquote, with Xbox. And that was the story. The story was this, again, another incompetent developer that had issues dealing with Xbox's system, which was maybe flawed or not. I have no idea. And instead of the story being about, what was actually going on, it was this hit piece on Xbox. Well, this is a little different because the game has been successful. It's got more notoriety and things like that. But still, it's this idea that either the developer is acknowledging that they're incompetent and they can't optimize a game for a system that every other game has optimized itself for, or he's lying, he's not being completely honest, or he's probably being convenient with the truth is maybe the better statement. and they have some kind of deal that prevents them from having it on Xbox yet, which is what Xbox has said multiple times. And I've seen people being like, well, I believe the developer more than them. One, I don't know why, because this developer and the studio in general has been super shady since the start, from the very beginning. There's also other reasons to feel that way, but I won't get into that because it'd probably make me look bad. Um, and Xbox has way more to lose than them. They lie about this, or they're convenient with the truth, is the way I would probably put it. They'll just be like, oh yeah, well, I mean, we had a deal, but that wasn't, they'll just dance around it and do the vague thing, which is what they've done so far. But if Xbox comes out and says that they have a deal with PlayStation and that it's not the Series S, and there's a way to prove them wrong, one, I think that Game Science would have done it by now. And two, it would look really bad for Xbox. Like, this looks way worse for Xbox, for them to dispute this than, if it's not true. Like, I just, being an Xbox fan, obviously I'm biased and I acknowledge that, but it's just one of those things where it's like people are just running with their own personal biases on this story and not acknowledging that something just seems super weird. Like, none of this seems normal, what's happening. And it's annoying because literally all they would have to say is like, hey, we have a year deal with Sony. We'll have this thing nice and optimized and ready to go for Xbox once that deal is over. We're excited to bring it to Xbox when we're able. That would be so much better. But instead, whether it's for contractual reasons or there's NDA stuff or whatever the issue is, that they're finding themselves having to like dance around and be vague and like maybe like lightly not tell the truth, to avoid just being like, yeah, we have a deal. That they helped us out. We're really grateful to them. And so that they get exclusivity for a while and then they won't. But for whatever reason, they aren't doing that. And if that's not true, if there really are issues, when going back to the Baldur's Gate 3 example, when that was happening, Larian was very clear. Like, they want parity between the versions of X and S. We can't make the co-op work on S, so we can't release the game on Xbox. Then they made an exception, allowed there to be no parity on that one feature, and it came out. It wasn't a big deal. Larian was very transparent from the very beginning. And then it got fixed, and now it's all good. Where Game Science is just being like, the memory, it's hard. Like, why? Like, why? Your game isn't doing anything special. Like, it's just another action adventure fighty game, RPG thing. Like, I just, it just seems fishy. Doesn't seem all on the up and up, and I just, definitely my own bias is at play here for sure. I'm not going to pretend like it's not, but I think that it's frustrating because I don't think we'll ever get the truth. And there's been a bunch of people already coming out and being like, "Yep, this is facts." The director said it on his personal profile on this thing that none of us actually use. But he said it, so it's got to be true, even though he said a bunch of stuff that doesn't seem completely true. That story's over, book is shut. So I don't know, frustrating for someone who wants to feel like we're getting the truth about this stuff. The honestly, the thing about these situations are the truth always lies somewhere in the middle. Whether it leans more towards one side or the other, who knows? But just the way these things work, I suspect we'll only ever get rumors and insider sources who are anonymous, and that we will probably never really know. But oh well. Moving on to some other stories, we have Xbox's Sabile controller. This is the thing that was leaked during the ABK acquisition when all those documents got accidentally leaked. It was a big nightmare for Xbox. It was kind of like it looked a little different than the modern controller, but the big thing with it was that it was supposed to have new features. The big one being haptics, similar to what the newest PlayStation controller has, which everyone just loses their mind about. Apparently it's the best thing that they've ever. Apparently, everyone who's played with it, it's the best thing that they've ever experienced in gaming. Even though it's not really supported by many games, and it doesn't seem to hurt anyone's experience on other platforms. But it seems like Xbox is trying to do it as well. and I think it had some other features too, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. Supposedly that controller is still coming. The implication in the leak was that it was going to come out before the next generation. But there was also implications in those leaks that there were going to be mid-gen refreshes for the Xbox, and that we'd be, looking at something like that. And we know that's not happening. And so now the rumor is that the Stabile controller will be coming along with the next gen hardware. The possibility of that next gen hardware is, I think it could come as soon as 2026, as next year, which is a weird thing to say now that we're in 2025. But I think that there's a very real possibility, as Xbox seems to be trying to get out of the rat race with PlayStation, for them to try to jump into the next gen early, to not try to be on the same cycle as PlayStation when they have the PS6 likely in 27 or 28. And that they're going to try to do their own thing. This also falls into another story that actually came up last week, that they supposedly Xbox is shopping around a little bit with third-party hardware manufacturers to see if other companies would want to make Xbox branded computers, or even make hardware that would be using the Xbox OS. So you would have essentially like an Asus Xbox. So it'd be like an Asus hardware with a GPU and chipset that they've picked. But when you start it up, it's the Xbox OS. I think something like that, especially if it would dual boot into Windows as like a regular computer, I think a device like that would be expensive depending on the hardware, but could be extremely successful, and could be very lucrative for Xbox, as they keep hardware made by themselves as an option, but not the requirement. A thing that people are having such a hard time wrapping their minds around, this idea that they, aren't doing the PlayStation thing, where PlayStation is just holding on for dear life with this idea of, you have to buy our box and then you can play our incredible games. Where Xbox is saying, here, we're going to make a bunch of incredible games and we're going to give you 50 ways to play them. And we don't really care how you do it. We would love if you bought our Xbox, or buy someone else's Xbox, or a PC, or stream on the cloud, or through your TV. We don't care. We just want you to play our games, to buy our games, to buy Game Pass. And this continues down that track, I think. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the idea of them opening this up, it's something I've been talking about for many years, at this point, is it wouldn't be a bad thing for them to have more options. Because you could even look at, budget options, things that would be even cheaper than like a Series S in theory. So we'll have to wait and see. Mike Shapiro, the voice actor for G-Man in the Half-Life series, teases something for 2025. So the notable thing about this is that the last time he did anything like this was a few years ago, before Half-Life Alyx got announced. Half-Life Alyx is a VR semi-sequel prequel thing to the Half-Life 2 games, to the different episodes. And it's the first like new Half-Life content we've gotten since the Half-Life 2 releases. The implication here is that he may be teasing Half-Life 3, and so we'll have to wait to see about that. The funny thing is that apparently this guy is in a band, and in this tease, he's doing like the G-Man voice, but it's also the album cover of his most recent album in the background as the video. And so I think he's being very clever and using his other notable work to promote his maybe less notable work. And this will probably come of nothing, but the idea that we could have, it would be hilarious if in the year that we finally get Grand Theft Auto 6, we get Half-Life 3 as well. I threw up a question on all my social media being like, hey, like, could a Half-Life 3 be the only game that could kind of steal the thunder a little bit from Grand Theft Auto 6? And you can see such an interesting age divide. And the people who are like, no one even knows what Half-Life is anymore. Or the people who are like, yeah, it's about the only thing that could do it. And I get that. The problem is with the people who are like, oh, no one even cares about Half-Life anymore. The whole thing about Half-Life, especially 2, is they didn't do it until they felt like they could do something unique enough to that it was, worth doing. And that was true with their physics systems and all that. It was insane. It was extremely good. They would only do Half-Life 3 if they could do things that were so unique and different to gaming that it would make a huge splash. And so I absolutely think that it could steal the thunder of Grand Theft Auto a bit if it got announced. I don't think it's getting announced. I think it's the pipe dream. I would love for this to happen, but I just, I'll believe it when I see it. And a little quick story, Rare, Xbox's studio, posted a holiday message giving a new art. They had like a happy holidays thing or whatever, and the art in the background or of the social media post was new Everwild art. So if you don't remember, Everwild was a game that was like teased or premiered many years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago now, and has kind of disappeared. A bunch of stories popped up a couple of years ago talking about how the development was rudderless, that they kind of, people didn't really know what they were doing with it, didn't know what kind of game it was supposed to be. It was kind of a hot mess. This seems to suggest that the project is at least still in development. So at the end of the day, it was like one of the prettiest trailers I've ever seen for a game. And at the very least, no matter what kind of game it actually becomes, I'm curious. I'm definitely interested to see what it would be. But yeah, it was definitely it's one of those games that it was right at the end of that era where we saw companies showing games off that were like hadn't even started development yet. And that hasn't happened since, even though I think this last Game Awards returned to that a bit. We saw like the Okami or whatever got shown, and then we found out that like literally the studio is still being put together and that they haven't even come close to starting development on it yet. So maybe we're getting back to those days, but Everwild is definitely kind of one of the last remnants of the old of the old times of teasing games before they're even close to development, which is a super good transition to talking about the next Mass Effect. BioWare's Mike Gamble gives the slightest suggestion that Paragon and Renegade systems may be returning from the Mass Effect trilogy to the next game. So if you pay attention to this stuff, then you know this already, but if not, I can tell you. Gamble, in the replies to someone, talked about how important the Paragon and Renegade system was. A content creator for Mass Effect kind of made some kind of oddly bold prediction and posted to a relatively large audience they have that it's definitely coming back. And Gamble kind of hilariously was like, that's not what I was talking about. But did end it with, just wait and see kind of an answer. I think that it's cool for fans to be a little overly zealous. Myself, I know everything about speculating and taking every little hint and hope and running with it and making videos and all that and making posts on Twitter. But it was kind of funny for him to like kind of slap it down real quick and be like, come on now. Like when he's ready to give us legit stuff, he'll give it to us, even if it's veiled a bit. But this idea of the Paragon and Renegade system returning to the Mass Effect series would be huge. It oddly was missing in Mass Effect Andromeda. I guess maybe it was the idea of it would feel too much like just trying to continue on trilogy stuff. But to me, the Paragon and Renegade system was always kind of like core to Mass Effect. It's so iconic to the series. And when it was missing in Andromeda, and the fact that Andromeda has so little variation in the ways that you can make choices anyways, I thought it was really missing. I do believe I don't want the Paragon and Renegade system to return in the sense of I want a blue and red selection to pop up when I'm in voice dialogue, and I don't even necessarily need to be able to go see a meter and see how Paragon or how Renegade I am. What I think I would like would be to see to have that system running in the background. If you've played the Fallout games and stuff where they have like the karma systems running kind of more in the background and reputation systems and all that, I would almost prefer that. So that helps with replayability. it helps with a lot of things when you're playing through the game of, you know, you don't just always pick the blue or the red, depending on the kind of playthrough you're doing, that you would need to actually consider the context and the implications and everything of the choices you make, and that would run a, Paragon and Renegade system in the background. And obviously over time people would figure out what choices are which and all that. But I've had this speculation and hope that in the next Mass Effect game they would have a system like that again, that could impact the crewmates that you can recruit, that would impact whether or not those crewmates will stay with you or betray you or be ultra loyal to you, that it would impact the characters you can romance or can't romance. I think it'd be really cool if that returns. I just don't think we've seen anything yet that makes it, we can't be bold enough to just assume that that's happening. When it comes to news about Mass Effect, I actually expect that to start picking up this year. We know that they're done working on Veilguard at this point. They have loaned out some of their developers to DICE to work on Battlefield. I saw one talking about that. A bunch of them are at EA Motive, who's working on their Iron Man game. So it seems like a bunch of the frontline devs, the environmental people, the people who make the models and that actually do the game, are doing other stuff right now while they finish up pre-production on the Mass Effect game, and then those people will come back. I've been told that specifically by one of the devs, that's the plan. So I think that will go into full production this year. I suspect any day now, honestly, here in the next month or two, or maybe more. And I suspect we'll start getting blogs and maybe videos and different kinds of announcements from BioWare. If you go back and look at how they treated Veilguard, which was originally Dreadwolf, you'll see that about 3 years before it came out is when they started doing very specific blogs about that game, always acknowledging the Mass Effect game as well, but it was always obvious what game was getting really worked on the most seriously. So if you're interested in the next Mass Effect, then there's some stuff for you right there. Then the final story here is that the writers of Secret Level claim that they pitched a Halo and Doom crossover episode to Microsoft, but they were denied. This has been a strange story because I imagine they pitched to everybody. I suspect that they pitched to every developer, or to at least many more than what actually got made. And if you read some of the statements and the way this is being presented, it reads as the Secret Level people being kind of babies about this, and that it was denied. That I've seen descriptions of the door was slammed in their faces, or that they were just told nah. It's just no, they just didn't want to do this. And I'm gonna be honest, the Secret Level thing, if it's from Love, Death, and Robots or whatever it's called, or Love, Sex, and Robots or whatever it is, which are really cool. They're really cool kind of short animated films that are really interesting, and many of them are the most visually stunning things you've ever seen. So the Secret Level was a gaming version of it, and there's there were 16 of them or something, and a handful of them are pretty good. Most of them are just kind of mid or mediocre in my opinion, and a few of them were really bad. And most notably, they did one for PlayStation, which I imagine would have been similar in the collaboration with this Doom and Halo one. The PlayStation one is really bad, and this isn't me just being an Xbox fan. I've not seen anyone say that they thought that the PlayStation one was good. It was frustrating because what it feels like is that PlayStation was sure, we'll do it, but we want to control every detail, and you have to run everything by us. Where it seems like with some of the other games, or some of the other episodes, they were maybe allowed to be a little more creative or do their own thing. Where the PlayStation one is just one of the most corporate. It just feels very PlayStation, and this isn't me ripping on PlayStation. They obviously are extremely good at what they do. They lead the between at least them and Xbox. They're kicking butt. They got a good thing going. but no one's going to accuse PlayStation of being like consumer friendly or warm or interactive with their fans and like in any real like organic or real way. They're very stiff. They're very corporate in the way that they message and all of that. And their episode was very much like that. And my assumption, I would guess, is that this Halo Doom thing, it just didn't seem good, or they just didn't like the idea of it, or just didn't like the idea of it yet. You know, why would they want them to release something like that in a year where, you know, I guess this year we're getting a Doom game, but we're probably not getting a Halo game this year. We're probably not getting one of those for a while. So it could have been a timing thing. They may have just not liked the pitch. But the way this has been portrayed, again, it's one of those weird things where, one, the writers have been like real whiny about it. And then in a bunch of the articles, if you read them about this story, is it's like Xbox being or Microsoft being portrayed as like the bad guys who are stifling creativity and fun. It's like, nah, they just probably didn't like the pitch, man. Like, it's okay. They don't have to like it. So I don't know. We'll see what comes. We know that there's a season 2 of Secret Level coming. There's been some insinuation, like Mike Gamble, who I spoke about with the Mass Effect stuff. He seemed to hint potentially that there could be a Secret Level episode about Mass Effect, which would be super cool. And we'll see what other ones they do. Wrapping this thing up, it's a bit of a shorter one. There's not a whole lot of news going on right now, and I just finished being sicker than I've ever been this week, so this was kind of a trial episode for me. With content updates, the Mass Effect Hypecast is in the works with N7 Legend. We spoke recently. He's finishing off Veilguard. He's got a whole bunch of stuff going on in his life, so he's trying to get some stuff in before all that stuff happens. So the hope is that we can jump on an episode, talk about N7 Day, or what was supposed to be N7 Day, to talk about the Veilguard and what we kind of feel about how that game, you know, what that may mean for the next Mass Effect. And then I'm assuming by the time him and I chat, there'll probably be a BioWare blog has been out. I'm expecting a BioWare blog this month, to give some kind of update on the studio in general. And I imagine it will be the first one that they'll put out, with Mass Effect being the next big game up. So that's pretty exciting, at least if you're like me, a psychopath. And that's where I'm going to wrap this thing up. If you have your own topics, questions, or feedback, be sure to let me know on my Discord, in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on social media at Bondiesel or at the Baunfire. It's going to be a fun year. I think there's going to be a lot of good games this year. I think there's going to be a lot of good discussions to have. I imagine the industry is going to continue to change and evolve this year. I imagine Xbox is going to keep having controversial things that are going to get portrayed in the worst possible way. So I'm genuinely excited for this year. So while this is my typical read out outro, I kind of wanted to throw that in. But that is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. Thank you so much for listening once again, and until next time.